My son-in-law leaned into his phone at my daughter's wake and muttered, "Finally, the inheritance is mine." I didn't shatter. I steadied 68 years teach a mother to breathe, not break. Quietly, I slid my chair back to the family line, signed the book where it belonged, and later opened the file box at home labeled, "Down payment letting paper start to speak for me." That whisper in the corridor was only the spark. What followed timestamps, quiet witnesses, and a camera that doesn't forget would turn grief into clarity and set the real story in motion. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The lilies hit me before the door finished closing. Not a sweet breath, but a thick bloom that sat low in the chest the way sorrow does when it refuses to be named. Soft bulbs hid in sconces along the wall, casting a careful light that made every ribbon gleam. My cane clicked once on the marble, once again on carpet to keep my steps even. This was the Heights funeral home Shannon and I had passed 100 times. Now I stood inside. A small placard waited near the front row, the word "family" in thick black letters. The row beyond it was full of coats and low murmurs. I found my chair one slot back and taped out of the marked boundary as if the carpet could decide who belonged. I did not ask who moved it. I slid the chair forward with my foot and the quiet scrape marked my place. When I sat, I kept my back tall. My cane rested across my knees like a quiet promise. The guest book sat on a small table with a glass pen that looked polished. Someone had placed a divider marked "Family Only," and I saw Lyle's tidy signature just under the heading. When I stepped up, the attendant kind, busy flipped the page over to guests without looking at me. Perhaps a habit. I said nothing. I turned the page back, found the family line where it waited, and wrote my name in full. I lifted my phone and took a single photograph that caught the blank lines above my ink paper, "Remembers." A white ribbon on a standing spray had my last name wrong, Hale, instead of Hale. I smoothed the crease and set the letter straight. Maura saw me and moved a quick, bright reach. Lyle's hand touched her shoulder before her fingers found mine. "Just a minute, kiddo," he said, directing her to a circle of visitors from his office. Maura glanced back without stopping. I nodded, easing the tug-of-war before it started. Love does not need a rope. Travis, the funeral director, came to stand beside me. He thanked me, then mentioned there had been a small adjustment to the service program to keep the evening on time. I asked for a printed copy. He brought me one. Red pen marked the page, 2 short paragraphs trimmed by hand, where I had planned to speak about Shannon's stubborn kindness. I traced the margin with my finger and let my voice stay even. It was the night to keep the page. People came with the language grief gives. "I'm so sorry. She was wonderful. What do you need?" I held hands. I accepted embraces. I let my shoulders do their quiet work. There were neighbors who had seen Shannon's porch plants grow, a few women from our church circle, and a cluster from Lyle's firm. Fewer came from Shannon's unit. The late shift, I told myself. I chose that explanation on purpose. Generosity is a habit that keeps the lungs open. From my corrected seat in the front row, the room became angles and edges. Lyle paced the side aisle with his phone, tipped close to his mouth, shaping a story. Travis drifted like a lighthouse keeper, adjusting lights and guiding people. Maura met my eyes now and then, as if we were passing a folded message. My handkerchief was already in my lap, a small square with blue thread, and inside it, tucked flat, the wallet-sized photo of Shannon at 22 with wind in her hair at Galveston. A man from Lyle's office stopped to ask if I needed water. I thanked him. The lilies had grown thicker. I needed cooler air. I stood pressed the cane tip to the carpet and let my weight find its balance. Travis saw me rise and move toward me. I raised 2 fingers, just water, and he paused, understanding. My steps carried me toward the hall, toward brighter light and plainer air. The hallway door eased shut behind me. Outside, the sound narrowed to vents and footsteps. I leaned for a breath and thought of the photo I had taken of the guest book, the red lines on the program, the chair's scrape returning a place to where it belonged. Not evidence to win, just a record the way a tide line marks where water stood. I followed the glow further down cane tapping once twice the rhythm that has kept me company since my hip began to fuss. At the bend, voices thinned into the kind of whisper people use when truth is dressed up. A syllable caught then a phrase, and I stopped, not because I was afraid, but because the next step would make sound. Then his words slid under the office door, turned low and certain. Finally, the inheritance is mine. The air went colder, because a different weather entered. I set the tip of my cane down with care, faced the light, and let my face learn to show nothing I did not choose. There would be a time to speak. This was the time to listen. I paused at the water station and let a paper cup cool my palm. A framed card on the wall listed chapel rules, silenced phones, no food, respect the family row. I smiled at that last rule. Rules grow loud when grace grows thin. A child hurried past with a grandparent, their shoes tapping in small duet, and I remembered Shannon squeezing my fingers before her first band concert until the music carried her forward. I set the cup aside and breathed. There is a way to stand at the hinge of a night without being pushed through it. I checked the photo of the guest book, my name clear the lines above it, empty, and slid the program with its red edits into the inside pocket of my jacket. Maura's glance felt tucked there, too warm as a folded note. A door opened down the hall and closed. The air lifted a faint cologne I didn't know. I let the details settle without judgment. Evidence favors patience. I touched the baseboard light with my eyes and followed its steady present to myself. Whatever came next would not teach me what love is. It would teach me who believed rules could replace it. The door hushed behind me, trading the floral haze for the corridor's colder breath. Fluorescent lights hummed like a thin wire. A drinking fountain blinked chrome at the corner. I set my cane against the wall and counted 2 breaths in 2, out the kind that clear thought. My palms cooled. My ears did the work. The night held still long enough to listen back. He stood near the side exit, half in shadow phone, tilted like a shield. No dramatics, no whisper forced through teeth, just a business voice soft enough to travel. We're good, probate will be quick. Finally, the inheritance is mine. The words landed clean, one by one, as if laid on tile. They did not bruise me. They froze me like thin ice claiming a puddle. I did not cough, gasp, or move to be noticed. I filed every syllable where it would not melt. He turned and saw me. The smile clicked on swift as a porch light. He pocketed the phone. "Arlise," he said, warmth fitted to my name. "Are you okay out here? Need water." His eyes looked for a script in my face. I let a nod be my answer and kept my hand on the cane. I would not rehearse grief for him, for I would not offer lines he could use later. I stepped past him toward the foyer. He moved with me a pace, then angled away, and his voice turned narrow as he reached Travis at the desk. "She's a bit forgetful tonight," Lyle said, hushed the kind people use to sound kind. "Let's skip her remarks so she won't get overwhelmed." I watched Travis's polite concern tilt toward assent. "Of course we can tighten the order," Travis murmured. I memorized the phrasing, each word stacked like a file tab. I returned to the desk. "Could I have the printed order of service for keepsake?" I asked. Travis handed me the marked program, red strokes cutting through my paragraph. I folded it once and placed it into my purse, now an evidence folder, not a weapon, a ledger. "Thank you, Lyle, for hosting," I said when he drifted back within courtesy distance. "I will speak when it's time." His pupils tightened. "I'm just worried for you." He offered, palms open, voice pitched for passers-by. "It's been a lot." "It has," I agreed. "That's why I'll use my own voice." He nodded as if we had agreed. We had not. 2 guests came through, one balancing a casserole carrier. Lyle's tone shifted to charm. "So thoughtful of you to come," he told them, and the words polished. I stepped aside, letting the moment make its own record. Above the door, the red LED of the camera held steady. I noted the lobby clock's time and the guests' coats. The room received me again with lilies and layered quiet. My chair nudged back behind the taped line, weighted like a dare. I slid it forward with the same care I would use to cut a straight seam. I sat. The program lay on my lap, open to the margin where my words were trimmed. The microphone stood at the aisle, patient as a post. I let my shoulders settle and gave the room my silence. Silence is not surrender. It is a tool you choose. Maura caught my eye from the aisle. She mouthed, "Grandma," and the word softened her face. I gave a small nod, "I'm here to stay." She looked to her father, then back to me, and smoothed the skirt of her black dress. That small act steadied me more than any prayer I could have spoken aloud. We carry each other with gestures when words are managed. Travis stepped to the lectern. The service moved toward the portion where I had been slated to speak. He glanced my way, question in his brow. I stood and he started to reach for the mic. I lifted a hand and eased it back toward him. "Not now," I said gently. His shoulders lowered. I did not decide why. I walked to the foyer desk instead. "Could you print me the billing contact for the floral order?" I asked the clerk, my voice even as a list. She nodded and began to type, nails quiet on the keys. The screen angled just enough to show the header. My name appeared as payer. The clerk hit print. The machine hummed. The paper slid out with a warm edge. "Thank you," I said, and tucked the slip behind the program in my purse. I stood a moment longer at the threshold and listened to the hymn rise and fall. I let the music pass through without catching. Then I turned, returned to my seat, and folded my hands over the purse. The plan needed steps, not volume. When the service ended, people stood in careful clusters. I thanked who needed thanking, accepted the touches that came, and searched no face for permission. Lyle approached and suggested we ride together. "I'll drive myself," I said. "I have to stop by the house." He studied me. "All right, see you there." His smile wrapped back around the evening. At the outer door, Maura reached me first. "Can I come with you later?" she asked low. "We'll see," I said, brushing a crumb of tissue from her sleeve. "I'll call." She nodded, brave and 13. I pressed my palm to her cheek for one breath and let her go. The night air outside held the day's heat like a careful hand. I walked to my car cane's steady purse, heavier by a page. The camera's red eye glowed in the corner as I passed. I did not look up. I didn't need to. Some records keep themselves. I left with my program, my receipt, and a plan. At home, a file box waited in the hall closet labeled Shannon Down Payment. I knew which drawer held it. I knew which envelope would match the florist's line and which date matched the deed. The night had said enough. The rest was paper and light. I set the Wakes program and the floral receipt on my kitchen counter and pulled the dented gray file box from the hall closet. The label still read, Shannon Down Payment. I lowered it to the living room rug, put the kettle on, and listened to rain begin in the live oaks. The house was quiet in the way that lets paper speak. I steadied my knees, opened the latches, and told myself, this is not anger, it's inventory. Paper before pixels. That is how I keep truth from slipping. I laid out what I had saved, closing disclosures, copies of cashier's checks, the settlement statement with its narrow columns. My pencil notes circled dates and initialed names. It felt like sweeping a porch after a storm, nothing dramatic, only necessary. I stacked the pages by type until the trail read like a road I could walk in order. Halfway down the bank wire appeared my name where it belonged. Originator Arliss Hale, Beneficiary Title Company, Escrow. The memo line I had insisted on sat exactly where memory would need it, for your first home mom's fund. The transfer date fell 3 days before closing. The amount matched the initial escrow and then some. I photographed the page front and back and wrote the time on a sticky note, so later no one would call the proof convenient. I opened the title packet copy and read it twice. Buyer Shannon Hale, co-buyer Lyle Mercer, vesting community property with right of survivorship. My name was nowhere not in a footnote, not in a list of gifted funds, not as so much as a line that said who made the first brick possible. The prepare date matched the week I sat in that office signing a gift letter while Lyle took a call. I stapled the wire confirmation on top like a cover sheet the packet had forgotten. The paper felt heavier in my hand. Tea poured. I opened my old laptop and logged into online banking. The archived transaction waited where the system keeps its memory. I printed 2 copies, one clean for people who dislike handwriting, one with my notes for me. The printer breathed and cooled. Rain kept slow time in the trees. I slipped the clean copy into a plastic sleeve and filed the annotated one in a manila folder labeled with tonight's date. My phone vibrated. A card-on-file charge I didn't recognize posted after midnight. I flagged it in the banking app, saved a screenshot, and wrote, "Ask bank to remove card on Lyle's Apple Pay on a yellow sticky." I pressed to the laptop lid. Not tonight's fight, only a marker on the path. You don't pull every weed in the dark. You clear the walkway you'll need at dawn. I drafted an email to my branch manager. Subject request for written confirmation of wire transfer memo line. I listed date, amount, destination, and typed the memo exactly for your first home mom's fund. I asked for a letter on bank letterhead for my estate file, attached the scan, and referenced the closing date. I scheduled it to send at 8 a.m. when human eyes see without deciding you've come unmoored in the night. At the bottom of the box, under a paperclip, lay a photograph I had forgotten Shannon on the porch steps with her first set of keys, afternoon light turning her hair to a kind of promise. I did not press the picture to my chest. I slid it into my wallet behind my driver's license. She loved that porch. The day we painted the rail white, she laughed at a drip on her elbow and said the house finally felt like itself. I made a checklist on a legal pad, printing like I was mapping a route. Wire confirmation done. Title packet copied. Bank letter requested. Floral invoice saved. Guest book photo saved. Order of service marked. Next, Shannon's iCloud notes voice memos. I underlined the last line. My daughter stored her thinking the way I do when speaking would only hand advantage to someone standing closer to the microphone. Her old iPad waited in the box, the one she told me to keep for puzzles. The charger lay in the shoebox where I save rubber bands and spare keys. The screen flickered, showed the 3 of us on the porch, then asked for entry. I tried 2 guesses and stopped. She had said, "If it acts up, use my thumb, yours is in there too." I pressed my thumb to the home button and watched the lock turn green. Folders appeared named the way she named everything plain exact. Budget, home, work, photos. One sat slightly apart as if she had nudged it away from daily use if things go wrong. I didn't open it yet. Batteries climb better when you let them. I set the tablet flat, dimmed the screen, and gathered the papers on the coffee table into sequence florist receipt, under wire confirmation guest book photo on top, my signature set neatly below a run of blank lines. Proof does not need commentary, it needs order. The clock over the stove ticked past 5. I wrapped the folder with a rubber band, tucked it into my canvas tote, and set the iPad to charge by the outlet. When the bank read my message, I would ask for a stamped letter listing originator, amount, date, and memo line paper that stands up in rooms where people pretend not to remember. I turned off the lamp and wrote 2 more lines on the pad call. Travis for service audio. Ask the funeral home about camera retention. Some records keep themselves, but only if you ask before routine erases them. Dawn bled into the blinds, silver and plain. I stacked the evidence square, breathed once, and let the house return to quiet. The iPad lay where I left it on the side table, a thin rectangle of my daughter's order. When the screen asked for a passcode, I used the 4 digits Shannon had me copy into my blue notebook years ago. The porch photo lit her hand over mine. I breathed once and tapped files. A folder sat a little apart, named the way she named everything if things go wrong. Inside were subfolders, estate insurance, mortgage trust notes, to Mom, each stamped with dates from the months before hospice. She had planned for a world I didn't want. She'd left me a map. I opened Notes to Mom first. The lines were blunt, useful, call Marcia, request bank letter, freeze unnecessary charges. Do not argue at public events. If Travis blocks remarks, keep the printed program. Under it, she'd typed paper carries farther than a raised voice. I felt the ache, then the steadiness that follows, clear instruction. In voice memos, a file waited. Mom read this, if needed. I pressed play. Her voice arrived calm, thin at the edges, but exact. Mom, if you're listening, remember what we signed. The trust gives you the right to occupy the house as long as you live. It protects Maura. If anyone pushes quick probate or asks you to step aside, let the paper speak. Keep calm. Call Marcia. Don't fight where Lyle performs. Dates and signatures will carry you. The message ended with a small exhale I knew from her childhood, determined, not defeated. I let silence hold the shape of her, and clarity followed. I opened Trust Addendum, sci-final.df. Yellow highlights hers ran beneath the clauses she'd referenced my lifetime right to occupy the successor trustee, beneficiary protections for Maura under specific conditions. 2 witness signatures, a notary seal pressed into the scan, the date aligning with the wire I printed last night. Parallel tracks, in the same month, her legal plan and my financial proof. In estate sat a text note. For when you doubt. Xed. It read, password is the date you taught me to drive MMDD. I typed it into forwhenyoudoubt.zip. The archive opened after a pause. Inside PDFs of email threads with the realtor and title office, a ledger of transfers stretching over 18 months, and a short index listing, saved voicemails with date and time. No fireworks, only care. I didn't binge, I logged. On a yellow pad, I made 3 columns file, name, date, what it proves. Realtor team thread, final to PDF seller credit timing. Title office, confirmed.pdf closing appointment, hospice call log. CSV calls matching my calendar. Ledger, summary.xlsx, my transfer and the escrow deposit in the same week. Checkmarks replaced adrenaline. Building a record beats building a scene. Printing turned the room into a small office. I exported the PDFs to a new folder, copied them to a fresh USB, and labeled it with today's date. On a cover sheet, I typed items exported from the iCloud account of the decedent accessed via family sharing, preserved with original file names and timestamps by Arliss Hale. I signed a simple chain of custody note when I accessed what I exported, where originals remain. The act of writing steadied me more than tea. I set a boundary I could defend. I would not rename files or reorder threads. I would not annotate inside documents. My notes would live beside, not within. If a court asked, I could say one clean sentence I preserved. I did not curate. Integrity is quieter than outrage and carries farther. The printer cooled. Morning pushed a pale square through the blinds. I drafted an email to Marcia and attached 3 items: the bank wire confirmation with its memo line, the trust addendum, and Shannon's voice memo exported with its time-stamped file name. Meeting today if possible, I wrote. I will bring originals and the chain of custody note. Before tapping send, I touched the porch photo, the place where her hand rested on mine. Paper will keep your promise, I said, and sent the message. I slid the USB into a small craft envelope and wrote, filed on the front, then initialed the flap over a strip of clear tape. I checked the pad bank letter requested. Program kept, email sent, USB sealed. Next steps waited in a short list call the branch manager. Print duplicates. Carry originals in a hard folder. No discussions at doorways. A notification pinged on my phone, a small recurring charge I didn't recognize. I flagged it and made a note. Ask bank to remove any card tied to Lyle's wallet. Then I set the phone face down. First the foundation, then the edges. I returned to voice memos, replayed the line about let the paper speak, and repeated it until it settled into muscle memory. In trust, I printed the signature page a second time and clipped it on top of the bundle where the wire memo sat. In mortgage, I skimmed a rate lock email and highlighted the date. It fit the ledger. In insurance, I found the policy listing both of them and a beneficiary change request saved but not sent. I did not interpret. I logged. By the sink, the kettle clicked off. I poured the last inch of tea and watched the neighbors walk dogs while sprinklers stitched arcs across lawns. No one outside could see what had shifted. I felt it anyway. I was still Shannon's mother. I was still Maura's grandmother. Those titles were not subject to Lyle's schedule or a director's adjustments. They came with duties. Today's duty was simple: carry what proves, say only what's necessary, and keep the rest for the room that matters. I gathered the packet cover sheet, chain of custody, trust addendum, bank wire, selected emails, ledger summary, and the voice memo on paper with its hash string printed in the corner. I added the funeral program and the floral receipt bearing my name. Evidence should live together. Stories can wait. I placed everything in a manila envelope and set my cane by the door. Before leaving, I opened the If Things Go Wrong folder one more time and scrolled to the subfolder labeled Notes to Mom. The last line read, "If you doubt yourself, read the first paragraph again." I did. Then I closed the iPad and slid it into my bag, not because I needed more proof, but because her voice lived there, steady and plain. The blinds clicked shut. I lifted the envelope, felt its weight, dates, signatures, transfers, a daughter's plan, and turned the deadbolt. Paper time and my name. It was enough to begin. Marcia's Midtown office ran on timestamps, not sympathy. I set my slim envelope on the table USB index chain of custody note, and she wrote the time initialed across my seal and slid a legal pad between us. "We'll let the paper speak," she said. That was the promise my daughter asked me to keep. She opened my index, then trust addendum, final.pdf. With one finger, she tracked a highlighted clause. Right to occupy yours, not discretionary, and here benefits protected for Maura. She scrolled. Contest provision. If anyone pressures or tries to silence you, I'm authorized to unseal an addendum your daughter lodged with me. Then open it, I said. She crossed to a shelf, pulled Shannon's red folder, and set a thin white envelope on the table. My daughter's handwriting ran across the face, open only if contested or if older adult is isolated or silenced. Marcia logged the moment, broke the seal, and laid out 3 pages, a notarized statement and a printed email chain. Shannon's statement was calm, factual. She described Lyle's push for fast probate, his worry that I might speak out of grief, and asked that any attempt to limit my presence be treated as behavior consistent with a contest. The emails showed a realtor thread, first names, pricing, talk, urgency. Dates and subject lines did the work, anger never can. My phone buzzed. Hannelore, my branch manager, had replied a signed PDF confirming my wire on the purchase date memo for your first home mom's fund deposited to title escrow. Marcia's mouth twitched, her version of a smile. This anchors your contribution and your credibility, she said. She turned the legal pad and outlined our morning. Temporary restraining order to freeze major transfers. Motion to recognize your right to occupy. Notice to preserve evidence. Subpoenas to the realtor, employer, HR company, accountant, and Maura's PTO. She printed the headings neat and square. We'll also hold an emergency hearing slot. I signed where she pointed. The scanner hummed. The e-filing portal chimed. Docket numbers stacked like fence posts. Her paralegal initialed our index as each piece went out. Watching it, I felt the steadiness I used to feel fastening my daughter's seatbelt to click. That meant she was held. Realtor communications, Marcia said, drafting the first subpoena. All valuation and listing emails 60 days before diagnosis to present metadata included. Click. HR beneficiary, change forms or benefit inquiries dated before the memorial. Click. Accounting expense submissions covering the hospice window. Click. PTO attendance notes referencing home changes. Another click. She booked an emergency hearing. The portal chimed again. We paused. Marcia reread the addendum. She anticipated this pattern, she said. She wanted you insulated by timestamps, not arguments. I nodded. Paper had always been our way to tell the truth without shouting. One more boundary, I said. My phone flagged a charge I don't recognize. Then instruct the bank to remove any tokenized device connected to your card and issue a new number, she replied. "No confrontation today, just clean permissions," she dictated. I wrote the request signed and we scanned it into the stack. She rehearsed 2 sentences with me. "I'm following counsel's guidance. All communication can go through counsel." I said them back level and cool. The paralegal pressed a gold seal onto the TRO and slid the pages to Marcia for final signature. She hit submit. Another chime. Midtown noise drifted through the window glass. A new email arrived. The paralegal stepped in, tablet in hand. Realtor replied, thread attached. Subject line reads, "List as soon as probate clears." First message is timestamped the night of the wake. Marcia turned the screen. The preview showed pricing notes and a question about clearing personal items quickly. "We'll attach it to the restraining order package," she said, already printing. "It demonstrates urgency inconsistent with respect for the estate." The printer offered up the page. The broker's signature block matched a flyer I'd once tossed unread. The portal confirmed our docket numbers. Marcia drew a box on her pad, hearing, and wrote 3 bullets: right to occupy, freeze transfers, preserve evidence. She tore the page free and handed it to me. "Put it on your fridge. If anyone calls, use the 2 sentences." I rose, gathered my copy of the filings, and slid the bank letter on top. The envelope felt like a permission slip I used to send with Shannon on field trips. Outside traffic thickened along Main. Inside, our morning moved on rails. My daughter set emails, clauses, even the envelope with her handwriting steady as ever. As I reached for the handle, the paralegal glanced up. "They were pricing paint before the lilies faded," he murmured. I didn't answer. Marcia did. "We'll let the judge read the dates." She squared the stack and met my eyes. "You did what she asked. You stayed calm. You kept the record." I held the folder against my ribs the way I used to carry field trip money under a big paperclip carefully, because what was inside belonged to a child. Now it belonged to Maura, and to the woman her mother raised me to be. On the way out, I clipped the hearing note to my folder beside a pen. A small ritual. Rituals steady you when the ground is mean. I breathed once and kept walking. Marcia angled the monitor toward me, the blue-white of her inbox washing the conference table. The realtor's thread we'd just opened sat on top like a neat bruised subject line, list after probate pricing notes attached. My pen hovered. Then I wrote the timestamp exactly as it read and the address line that showed Lyle's private account. No adjectives. Numbers and lines hold better than feelings. We scrolled. Lorena the realtor had sent comps at 6:41 p.m. on the night of the wake, polite and efficient. Lyle answered 2 minutes later, the reply coming from his phone. "Understood. Let's be ready the moment probate clears." The words were clean, practiced. I copied them down without comment, then put a square around the time 6:43. On my paper, the square meant remember this, even if your hands shake. Marcia tapped a key to expand the headers, then flagged the thread for the return package. "We'll exhibit the subject line and these 2 messages," she said, voice even. "The rest can wait for hearing." I nodded. Vindication feels different than victory. It has no glitter. It sits cold and tidy beside the grief it does not fix. HR came in. Marcia added, opening a new message. A PDF rendered PTO request. Aileen from his company had signed the cover note. On the form, Lyle's typed reason read probate appointments dated 2 days before the service. Approved. I traced the dates with my pen, then drew a faint arrow to the realtor square. A paper braid was beginning. "Next hospice," Marcia said, and her tone softened without losing shape. Stacy from intake had returned their call log. There it was, a call from Lyle in the hour before visitation flagged as timing question paperwork. I breathed once slow and wrote that time too. I did not make it a square. I made it a line straight as I could. Some lines you do not frame. We built a simple chart, emails, PTO, hospice. Under each column, we set those times, letting them speak to each other without me adding a single hard word. When Marcia prints charts, she uses gray lines, not black. It helps a judge find the text faster, she once told me. I watched the chart form and felt my shoulders drop a half inch. A case is not a feeling. It is a map. I remembered the tiny red LED above the corridor door at the funeral home. Their camera, I said. The door with the glow. Marcia picked up her desk phone, then typed while it rang. Travis, hello. Yes, we filed a preservation letter this morning. She summarized plain and professional, the date, the hours, the corridor. Travis asked for a formal subpoena. Marcia told him it was queued and thanked him for acknowledging preservation. The call took 2 minutes. She sent a confirming email before hanging. By late afternoon, the light in her office turned flatter and kinder. The printer breathed. The scanner hummed. I initialed in the corner of each exhibit like I was steadying the paper itself. When we paused, Marcia slid a glass of water toward me. You're doing well, she said. I answered the way we practiced. All communication can go through counsel. Back home, I laid my yellow legal pad on the kitchen table and drew 3 tall columns to match the chart we'd built. Emails, PTO, hospice. Under emails, I wrote 6/41 and 6/43. Under PTO, I wrote the request date. Under hospice, I wrote the time of his timing question. Then I drew a small colored block over the overlaps. The blocks made a braid anyone could see. I kept my handwriting plain. Judges are human. Clutter is a kind of noise. I rinsed a mug and set it upside down to dry. The duplex was very quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear the neighbor's dog sigh. I checked my phone and saw Travis's email flash across the screen. Preservation acknowledged corridor footage retained for subpoena. I set the phone face down the way I do when I want to sleep without checking it every 8 minutes. There is a steadiness that comes when the hours start to hold still. I sat and looked at my columns again, then added a 4th list in the margin: accountant, funeral home, HR, follow-up, realtor, auth. Tomorrow, Marcia would call the accountant under oath. Numbers don't need adjectives either. They march left to right until someone stops them. Before I put the pad away, I dialed the bank's main line and waited through the menu until a person answered. I asked for a note on my profile remove any connected wallet that charged my card without a physical swipe. The rep confirmed and emailed a reference number. I wrote it at the bottom of the page and boxed it. Not a flourish, just a guardrail. Marcia had given me a script for the noises that would come. I'm following counsel's guidance, and please route that through counsel. I said both sentences out loud in my kitchen to hear if they fit. They did. They tasted like clean water, nothing extra. I set an alarm for 7:10 a.m. labeled accountant call. Then I breathed the way the hospice nurse taught Shannon and me in for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. Maura's face rose in my mind, a crease she gets when she reads. For her, I kept my voice even in empty rooms. For her, I wrote the time straight. I locked the deadbolt, turned off the kitchen light, and left the chart where it lay. The paper would be here in the morning, still saying only what it could prove. In this house, that was a comfort I could count. At 8:00 a.m., the reporter's laptop glowed on Marcia's conference table, its little mic icon red. Jody Ferris raised her right hand on the screen and swore to tell the truth. No small talk, no softening. Marcia stated the case caption, date, and time for the record, then asked the first precise question. I sat with my yellow pad, today's page ruled into columns pen, uncapped the habit of a former bookkeeper who still believes rows can carry weight. Please identify the PTO entry you produced, Marcia said. Jody leaned toward her camera. Employee Lyle Mercer. Entry date 2 days before the wake. Reason typed by employee, probate appointments. Approved by manager same day. I wrote those words exactly then, the approval time, then a neat box around both. Vindication isn't loud. It's a square with corners that hold. Next expense approvals that week, Marcia said. Jody pulled up a ledger view and scrolled. Meal labeled client lunch at 6:37 p.m. on the day of the service. Amount $58 and change. Receipt attached. Marcia shared her screen. The receipt PDF showed a bistro in the Heights. I remembered the Realtor Threads timestamp 6:41 p.m., Lorena's comps. On my pad, I drew a short line between the numbers and wrote one-word overlaps. Marcia marked the ledger and receipt as exhibits. For the hearing, we'll limit your testimony to dates, times, and policy, she told Jody. No opinions. Understood, Jody said. Her voice was tidy like a spreadsheet that balances at 0. When the reporter confirmed the transcript header had the right time zone, Marcia ended the call, logged the file, and looked to me. That's the math, she said. Next, the camera. By late morning, we drove to the Heights, a quiet block from the chapel side of the funeral home. Travis met us at the records desk with a clerk and a small stack of forms. The corridor camera lived on a system that named files like dates, not memories. The clerk printed a media retrieval receipt listing start and end times that matched the window when Lyle paced the hallway. I initialed next to the hash placeholders and the line that said secure link to counsel, no copy released to requester. Paper belongs to no one. It simply remembers and reports. We'll upload by end of day, Travis said. He looked carefully neutral the way people do when their building has become a fact. Marcia thanked him and slid our subpoena copy back into her folder. Chain of custody is a dry phrase until you imagine a judge's hands on the page. On our way back, I asked Marcia to stop by my branch. Hannelor's staff already had my profile note. In a small glass office, a teller walked me through device D-Link, remove my card from any digital wallet that didn't require a physical swipe. I signed a confirmation, watched a gray bar on the screen turn to the word removed, and felt something unclench under my ribs. A new card printed unadorned as a good lock. Outside in the car, I texted a photo of the confirmation to Marcia. For the file, I wrote. At the office again, we 3-hole punched the day's stack, a bank memo confirming my wire to the house, B, the restaurant receipt tied to the ledger, C, the camera receipt. Docket stickers slid onto each upper right corner numbers in neat black type. Marcia keeps a small bone folder for creasing cover letters. The crease makes envelopes behave. She smoothed one now and smiled. It's not drama, she said. It's order. By late afternoon, I was back at my kitchen table with the legal pad. I added new lines to the braid I'd started yesterday ledger meal. Pricing email PTO. Hospice call camera file window. Corridor mutter. Under those, I wrote Jody witness dates only. I keep Maura's school photo clipped to the top of the pad. It's not decoration. It's direction. My phone buzzed with Marcia's email. Hearing set for Friday, 9. Ju AM accountant, 9:30 camera clip. I printed the schedule and folded it into my wallet behind Shannon's picture, not next to cash. The schedule felt like a spine numbers rooms times the things that let a body stand. Lyle's name lit my screen and went dark. I inhaled, exhaled, recited the 2 lines we practiced. I'm following counsel's guidance. Please route that through counsel. No need to use them tonight. I washed a cup, set it to dry, and checked the mailbox before dusk. A thin envelope from the bank waited with the formal letterhead version of Hannelor's email, my wire confirmation, the memo line Mom's Fund, stamped and signed. I slid it into the front of a blue binder I'd bought years ago for recipes and never used. Now it would hold this other kind of nourishment documents that keep you upright. When night came, I redrew the braid, clean on a fresh sheet the way I used to copy clean ledgers for auditors. Emails, PTO, hospice, ledger meal, camera window. I printed each label, then penciled the overlaps as small shaded blocks, a quiet geometry of intent. Without raising my voice, I could see the story forming, not a grievance, not a guess, just times choosing each other. Before bed, I set a silent alarm for Friday and laid out a navy sweater that doesn't fuss with microphones. I put 1 cough drop in my pocket, not for nerves, but because courthouse air dries the throat. I touched the binder's spine, then the photo in my wallet, and said the one thing that still felt like prayer hold. I slept without dreams. The paperwork kept watch. Tonight. Security trays slid forward one by one as we entered the Harris County Courthouse. I placed my tote on the belt cane and the gray bin shoes squeaking on polished stone. The guard's nod felt like a gate opening in my chest. Marcia handed me a simple printout witness order exhibit list hearing scope. I tucked my yellow pad inside the tote and breathed through my nose the way hospice nurses taught me. Calm isn't softness. It is a brace. Inside, the clerk's clock read 8:56. We chose a bench 2 rows back. When the judge took the bench, the room rose, sat, and quieted in a single practiced movement. The clerk called our case. Marcia stood. Your Honor, limited disclosure hearing, asset preservation right of occupancy, evidentiary returns. Opposing counsel objected to prejudicial exhibits. The judge raised a palm. We'll stick to foundation and scope. Jody Ferris appeared at the side table with a court reporter and her neat folder. She was sworn without ceremony. Marcia began with the bones. State your role and whether you are custodian of the records produced. Jody did, directing your attention to defendant's PTO request. She identified the form 2 days before the wake reason typed as probate appointments manager approval the same day. The reporter's keys ticked like rain. I wrote each time, drew a square around the pair. Now the expense approvals that same week, Marcia said. Jody read from a ledger meal labeled Client Lunch at 6:37 p.m. on the evening of the service. Receipt attached. On the screen, the bistro logo matched the neighborhood. Our chart line APTO line B, meal line C realtor email sat on an easel. Marcia asked Jody to read the times. She did steady and plain. The judge asked for a copy for Chambers. Cross came quick. Ms. Ferris, you don't know intent, do you? The lawyer asked. No, she said. Dates and amounts only. No one scolded him for asking. No one needed to. Numbers trained the room to stay small and exact. Marcia called the clerk to identify the funeral home media receipt. Hash value, file range, camera location corridor outside the chapel. The clerk read the chain of custody notations, then cued the 12-second clip. Sound off. Picture clear Lyle near the exit with his phone angled to his mouth, shoulders turned away from the flow of mourners. The captioned transcript scrolled below. We're good, probate will be quick. Finally, the inheritance is mine. A date and minute burned in white at the bottom. Chairs creaked because people remembered they were sitting. I did not turn my head. I wrote the exact time on my pad and circled it once. Marcia spoke without weight on the words. Your Honor. We asked the court to notice that the clip's timestamp aligns with the expense receipt and the realtor thread already authenticated. The judge nodded. Admitted for limited purpose. My testimony was short by design. Under oath, I confirmed the bank wire that began the down payment my name on the originator line memo, Mom's Fund, and that I had reviewed with counsel the addendum granting me a right to occupy my daughter's home. No further questions, Marcia said. The judge asked me to sit. I returned to the bench spine, tall hands quiet. Opposing asked to strike the caption on the clip. Denied. He asked if the PTO form could mean grief. The judge lifted one brow. The record speaks to labels counsel. He sat. Marcia rested the record. The clerk logged each exhibit by number. Our stack had neat corners, none curling each with a date that would outlast memory. Closing remarks were procedural. Marcia requested temporary orders preserving assets and recognizing occupancy until the full hearing. She proposed deadlines for production from the funeral home and the employer and a time slot for the accountant's live testimony if needed. Opposing argued family privacy and undue inferences. The judge looked down at the chart, then back up at us. I will issue written orders this afternoon, she said. One gavel tap. We rose. In the hallway outside, the fluorescents washed the color from everything carpet suits nerves. Marcia and I sat on a wooden bench. I placed my phone face down and kept my hands folded. Across the hall, Lyle laughed too loudly at something no one said. I practiced the 2 sentences we had rehearsed under my breath and felt them click into place like a clasp I'm following counsel's guidance. Please route that through counsel. Time moved in courthouse inches. A bailiff held the door for a juror in another case. A mother hushed a toddler with graham crackers. Somewhere above an elevator cable sighed. On my knee, the yellow pad lay open to a fresh page where I had written 2 words at the top, hold steady. I was not waiting for triumph. I was waiting for paper. When the phone buzzed, I still didn't flip it. I let it finish, then turned it face up. A notification banner from the clerk's system, orders posted. Marcia's eyes met mine. We stood without fuss, found a corner by a window, and opened the portal on my screen. The docket page loaded line by line. Order 1, asset preservation. No transfers, no listings. Order 2, recognition of my right to occupy pending final adjudication. Order 3s, production deadlines for employer, realtor, and funeral home media. A hearing date blinked beneath Friday next at 9:00 a.m. My breath left in a quiet, grateful sigh. Yes, I kept my spine up. We stood when the judge returned. The room settled into that courthouse hush that makes footsteps sound like decisions. I kept my hands on my tote, the morning's papers stacked inside. The clerk set a thin bundle on the bench, and the judge looked down over his glasses. Voice measured the weight of procedure doing what it does. He summarized the record first. Timestamps between emails and expense receipts, the PTO form marked probate appointments. The hospice call logged within the visitation hour, he named each, without comment. He noted the authenticated corridor clip and the bank memorandum identifying my wire as Mom's fund. These items taken together, he said, justify provisional protections while probate proceeds. My breath moved shallow but steady. Then the reversal came not loud, simply exact. The court recognizes Ms. Hale's right to occupy the marital home pursuant to the trust addendum. He paused while the clerk typed. No listing transfer or encumbrance shall be attempted pending further order. Keys remain active for Ms. Hale. A status conference is set 30 days from today. The words felt like a beam slid under a house. I did not look toward Lyle. I focused on the bench seal on its steady shape. Next, the perimeter. Asset preservation measures are granted on an interim basis, he said. No withdrawals beyond ordinary living expenses. Communications between parties shall be routed through counsel. No commentary online. The bailiff shifted and papers whispered along counsel tables. This was not drama. It was a lane being painted on the road. Opposing counsel rose to object, prejudicial exhibits, inference of motive, and the judge answered with a calm hand. This is not a final judgment. The court is controlling the field while facts are gathered. Objection is overruled. He tapped his gavel once simply to mark the page. Copies came down the line. The clerk passed stamped orders to our table. Marcia leaned in. Nothing showy. We'll serve these this hour. Locks audit utility notices. Realtor hold title and HOA copies. Bank confirmations. I'll coordinate. You don't have to say a word to anyone. I nodded. My voice lived in the paper now. My presence would be the quiet kind that follows rules and keeps the door open for justice. In the hallway, the air felt cooler. Lyle glanced toward me, mouth ready to pull us back into explaining the obvious. I kept my script ready and my face calm. Please contact counsel, I said once. He waited for more. I didn't feed him a second line. We walked past heels, soft on the tile, the fluorescent lights, indifferent to performance. The sprint began. Marcia handed the process server envelopes and watched him vanish into the elevator. She emailed the realtor with the order attached, hold per court. Certified copies flowed to the title office, the HOA, the bank, the funeral home for continued media preservation. Each message carried a docket number. Each attachment bore the judge's stamp. I thought of Shannon's memo in my purse, let paper do its job. Only when the last confirmation pinged did my shoulders drop. We did not celebrate. We purchased stamps for the copies still going by mail. We printed one extra for my drawer at home. Marcia squeezed my forearm, once professional and kind. Go steady, she said. You've done everything right. I drove home with the orders tucked upright so they wouldn't curl. The house received me the way a porch receives evening quiet with a place to set things down. I filed the orders in the kitchen drawer I labeled long ago for stubborn papers. No one wants to need warrants and wills. I rinsed a glass and stood in the doorway of the room that still held her clean scent. My fingers touched the doorframe. I did not rename the room. Names matter. They should be placed on purpose. The phone lit on the counter. A text from Maura blinked. Grandma, can I come over tomorrow to help you set up your room? The pronoun landed softly, not as a replacement, but as a thread. I typed 3 words that felt like a promise. Yes, bring tape. I prepared the small things that make orders real. A fresh set of keys on a bright tag, sticky notes for the closet bins, the label maker on the table, a new cartridge clicked in. I would not turn the evening into a shrine or a standoff. I would do the next right thing, then the next. When the sun lowered, I walked the perimeter the judge had drawn in language. Windows latched porch light set to its sensor mailbox. Flag down. I moved like a person who belonged in her house, not loudly, not asking permission. The papers in the drawer did not make the floors firmer, and yet they did. A beam under a house can be words if they are the right words and signed by the right hand. By the sink, I rested my palm on the cool counter and breathed through the ache that never quite leaves. Grief is not an enemy. It is a witness that refuses to lie. I thanked it for sitting with me without raising its voice. I thanked the room for remembering what it had been and for agreeing to wait until morning to become what it will be. The porch light clicked on. The street was quiet enough to hear a dog collar jingle 2 houses over. I folded the court schedule and slid it behind Shannon's photo in my wallet. Tomorrow would bring tape a teenager's careful hands and a small, honest ceremony that needed no pastor. No microphone, no permission, only the truth of who paid who, promised, and who is allowed to stay. Maura arrived late morning with a tote and the label maker I'd asked for. The house was bright and quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear scissors coming out of a drawer. We put the blue painter's tape and a fresh cartridge on the kitchen counter beside the court order, which I had set in the warrants and wills drawer the night before. I brought extra tape, she said, a teenager's way of saying, "I'm staying as long as you'll have me." We walked the hall in sunlight dust, riding in the light. The door at the end had a neat little tag, a realtor once printed guest room. It looked like polite erasure, the kind that smiles while it moves you half a step out of frame. I peeled the tag off with a fingernail. The wood kept the outline. Maura typed on the label maker, the keys clicked a firm rhythm, and the tiny screen spelled what we meant without poetry. Mom's room keep. We set the strip under the doorplate, not over it, so the wood could tell its own story. We opened the closet and the cedar chest, measuring what to bring back and what to fold away. The realtor's white duvet had always felt like a hotel apology. We lifted it together and folded it into a square that could live on the top shelf. From the cedar chest, we lifted Shannon's quilt, the one with 2 crooked stars, and a border stitched by a beginner who learned quickly. I shook it once, and the room remembered her hands. I set her photo on the dresser, left corner, not center. I have learned that center is for performance. Corners hold what stays. In the kitchen, I showed Maura the drawer I rely on when the world tries to talk louder than paper. Orders occupancy. I said, sliding a new tab into place. She closed the drawer like a vault, careful eyes on the edge so it wouldn't pinch. "It feels real," she murmured. "It is real," I answered. Real doesn't always shout. We ate grilled cheese and sliced pears standing at the counter the way Shannon and I used to when a day needed finishing. Maura picked the mug with first keys on it, the one from the day her mother closed on this house. She traced the letters with a fingertip while I washed a plate. Grief walked by the doorway and kept going. We let it pass without calling it back. Back in the closet, a small shoebox waited on the top shelf, labeled in my daughter's shorthand porch keys. Inside, we found brass, a spare garage clicker, and a note folded to the size of a postage stamp. "If things go wrong, keep the door yours." The handwriting was hers sharp where mine is rounded. I slid the note into my wallet behind her photo, a private hinge and a thing I carry everywhere. My phone buzzed, doorbell camera ping. Lyle's car idled at the curb like a thought trying to become speech. I did not open the door. I texted Marcia vehicle outside. No contact, orders intact. She replied in a minute good. Log time only. I wrote the minute and the plate in the small notebook I keep by the phone. We went on with our list. Silence is not surrender when it obeys a line drawn by a judge. In the doorway, Maura handed me the label strip we'd printed. We read one line from the order together, the one that names my right to occupy. I breathed it into the room like you would read a blessing over bread. Then we pressed the strip, smooth thumbs moving slow to push out bubbles. No applause followed, only air moving through a house that had chosen to be a home again. It felt like setting a bone in place, quiet pain before quiet strength after. Afternoon softened the edges of the furniture. We made the bed, and I showed Maura her mother's way of tucking corners the sailboat-tight method. The room looked lived in again, a book on the nightstand. The quilt settled a sweater over the chair back waiting for a shoulder. We left the window cracked to hear the elm leaves tap each other when wind moved. Near dusk, I walked the perimeter once more, not out of fear, but out of habit. Locks aligned, porch light on sensor mailbox checked. I returned to the kitchen and slid the order back half an inch in the drawer so the stamp would show if anyone ever needed the quick truth. Maura labeled 2 storage bins with tidy letters, Linens Winter. Grandma, she said it's like the house knows its own name again. I kissed the top of her head. Names are anchors, baby. They keep you from drifting when someone tugs. We stood in the doorway and looked without speaking. A small victory, the kind you can hold in one hand. Not a headline, not a speech, just a room that would remain mine because a daughter planned, and a court listened because a grandmother and a child pressed a label straight. As I washed the last glass, my phone dinged. Marcia had forwarded an HR email follow-up questions regarding probate appointments. Paper kept knocking and doors kept answering. I dried my hands, set the glass down, and wrote tomorrow's time slot for Maura noon for grilled cheese. Again, 1 for sorting books, 2 for a walk. We turned off the light. The label glowed pale in the hallway, steady as a nightlight saying what it needed to say in a voice that never had to raise itself. Before bed, I checked the doorbell log and saved the timestamps, then silenced notifications. The house settled, wood ticking as it cooled. I put the label maker away and the spare keys in a bowl by the lamp. Tomorrow we'd answer HR with dates. Tonight we slept in a room that finally said our names. Monday began with the soft whir of my printer. Marcia had forwarded HR's request just after sunrise. Polite, concise, time-stamped. They wanted documentation for the bereavement days, the meetings labeled probate appointments, and any exhibits that clarified the sequence we presented in court. I set my mug beside the warrants and wills drawer, opened it, and touched each tab like a short prayer orders occupancy bank memo community. I built a slim packet the way Shannon taught her 8th graders to assemble a lab report title page exhibits list-numbered pages. First the court order with my address redacted, next the bank letter confirming the wire with the memo Mom's Fund. Then the 3-column chart. I had penciled at the kitchen table PTO the realtor thread the hospice call, typed clean now times, aligned in a single row. Last my 1-page chain of custody note for the corridor clip and the iCloud files. No adjectives. By mid-morning, I stood in the downtown HR lobby packet in a manila envelope under my arm. The carpet swallowed heel noise. The air smelled like coffee that had been hot an hour ago. I slid the envelope to reception and took a visitor sticker. The elevator chimed. Lyle stepped out, eyes darting, then smoothing. I turned toward a seating alcove, faced a potted fern, and texted Marcia delivery complete. Visual contact, only no words. I logged the time. Aileen met me with a folder and a glass of water. We sat in a small room with neutral art and a digital clock that ticked without sound. I have a series of narrow questions, she said. I nodded. She began with dates when I wired the down payment, when I heard what I heard in the corridor, when hospice logged its call. I answered one line at a time. I am the originator of the down payment funds. I heard the word inheritance at the wake. The hospice call record is in the file. I did not color the answers. I let the pages carry their own weight, and I kept my voice as level as courthouse marble. They walked me back to the lobby. At the desk, Aileen paused. For your awareness, Ms. Hale, she said, we are placing Mr. Mercer on administrative leave, pending an internal review of timekeeping and conduct during the bereavement period. His badge will permit HR appointments only. I did not look at the elevator. Thank you, I said and signed where she asked. Back in the Heights, I emailed the HOA manager the stamped order. Please note the prohibition on listing or signage I wrote. The reply came quickly. Acknowledgement, the words, "Any lockbox request remains on hold," and a line about complying with court directives. Paper spoke like a weather report, calm, factual, uninterested in opinions. That afternoon, Marcia called. 2 letters just arrived, she said. Stacy from hospice confirms the timing of Lyle's call. The funeral director provides a neutral statement on the corridor clip's chain of custody. I'll file them as community witness letters. I pictured the pages sliding under a new tab and felt something loosen in my shoulders. I checked the online docket as the sun moved across my kitchen tiles. The case number blinked into fresh lines. Exhibits 22 and 23, community letters filed. A green check replaced a gray box. I printed the updated sheet, hole-punched it, and slid it into the drawer behind community. The drawer shut with that small, satisfying sound of things fitting. Near dusk, a text came from an unknown number, short and sour, designed to snag. I forwarded it to Marcia with the single word "received," deleted it, and wrote the time on my grid. Some things you record and let the record hold. I boiled pasta, ate a small bowl, and washed the pot before the starch could set. Household tasks make reasonable armor. They keep the hands busy while the mind waits. When the phone rang again, it was the court clerk. Ms. Hale, she said the judge has set a status and closure conference for Thursday morning. The notice is on its way. I thanked her, wrote the date on a sticky note, and pressed it to the fridge beside Maura's softball schedule. Before bed, I walked through the house on quiet feet the way you do when a child is sleeping, and you don't want the door to click. The new label on the bedroom door lay smooth under my fingers. Downstairs, the order rested next to the docket sheet, and the letters that were not opinions, only facts. I opened my wallet and looked at the photo tucked behind my ID, Shannon with her first keys, grin crooked by sunlight. Paper kept its promise today. I said into the room that now had her name. I set my phone face down and turned the lamp low. The city hummed. Somewhere a dog barked, then remembered itself and stopped. I thought of the judge's bench and the clock above it, of Jody's careful voice, of the funeral home's red camera light, of Aileen's pen, still capped until the answers were clean. People talk and fade, paper sits and stays. On Thursday, the judge will ask for any final statements. Mine will fit on a single line the size of a label. I will ask the court to keep honoring what my daughter signed, my right to remain Maura's share protected, and a clean accounting of every dollar that moved while Lily's were still fresh. The rest I will leave to the policies and the calendar. Grief does not need theater. It needs boundaries and a door that shuts. The clerk called our case on a short calendar. We stood. The judge glanced at his notes and said closure conference. Marcia slid a slim binder onto counsel table. I kept my yellow pad closed, one palm on its cover. These rooms reward brevity. I brought only what paper required. The judge spoke without preface. Prior findings would carry forward, the corridor clip, authenticated and time-stamped. PTO and realtor email in the same window, the hospice log keyed to the hour before visitation, the bank letter naming my Wire Moms fund, 2 community letters noting chain of custody and timing. Scope remains property occupancy and interim financial controls, he said. No one argued with nouns. Marcia rose for one last exhibit, a tracing addendum from the bank. The clerk marked it Exhibit 41. It followed my wire into purchase escrow and initial taxes. The judge read, then nodded once. Persuasive to contribution, he said. That was the brick we needed to finish the wall. Opposing counsel asked for a sidebar. The judge listened, chin in hand. Marcia answered in a voice that traveled no farther than it had to. When they returned, the judge said, "Terms have been reached. Put them on the record." Opposing counsel read them like directions. I retain a lifetime right to occupy the home. No listing or sale without my signed consent. Mr. Mercer withdraws any contest. A designated amount moves to an education trust for Maura. Mutual non-disparagement. Each party bears its own fees. The judge accepted. Consent decree is entered. He looked to our table. Final remarks. Marcia shook her head. I stood and said the one sentence I had rehearsed. My daughter asked me to let paper keep its promise. I have. It fit the room like a key in a lock. The gavel tapped once. We gathered our quiet things. In the corridor, we left space that could have become theater. Lyle slowed, then kept walking. If words had risen, I was ready with the script Marcia taught me. Please direct all communication to counsel. I wish you a steady day. No words came. The elevator doors closed with a gentle seal. By mid-afternoon, the house breathed different air. I slid the consent decree into the warrants and wills drawer and set the label maker beside it, a tool we might not need soon. The room we renamed held a steady square of light across Shannon's quilt. I smoothed the edge she used to tuck and felt the fabric give back a little warmth, like breath returning. Maura arrived with a spiral notebook and 3 pens. We added a tab that said, Education Trust. Maura then listed a few Near Horizons textbooks that smell like ink. A summer studio where brushes live in jars. One campus visit far enough to feel brave and close enough to feel held. She didn't ask permission to hope. She wrote underlined, dotted the I in her name with a small square, her mother's habit. We ate tacos at the counter and rinsed the plates without ceremony. On the way to the porch, she checked the door camera and grinned at the green check that means recordings are retained. Paper with a lens, she said. I laughed once, a sound that felt like air after a long hallway. Twilight softened the block. We sat where the wood creaks in the same 2 places, honest about age. A neighbor's radio found a hymn and let it drift. The air smelled of cut grass and a rain that had not decided. I thought of the day Shannon first held those keys, how her grin leaned into sunlight like a dare. I did not replay the corridor clip. I let the sounds of this evening carry farther than the words of that night. Grandma Maura asked what happens now. Now we live in a house that kept its name, I said, and we use money that tells the truth. She leaned on my shoulder. The oaks tried every leaf like doorknobs. The leaves held. Inside, the consent decree waited in its drawer like a heartbeat you can find if you're calm. Before we turned in, I set one more copy of the decree in a shoebox on the closet shelf and labeled it simply, Copy's Decree. The tape peeled free with that neat little sound that means things are in their places. Tomorrow I'll take another copy to the safe deposit box and mail one to the HOA. Paper travels at the pace of mail and still arrives on time. At the kitchen window, I watched a dog tug a sleepy neighbor down the sidewalk, the leash making a clean curve in the porch light. I straightened the magnets on the fridge into a tidy row and felt for the first time in weeks the ordinary return routine stepping forward and offering its hand. I opened my wallet and touched the photo of Shannon with her first keys. Kept, I said, because some words earn their smallness. I locked the door not against the world, but for the home we kept, and let the house rest certain as paper and soft as breath. As I close this chapter, here's what I learned. Grief doesn't cancel wisdom, and paperwork can be love when it protects the living. Keep records. Speak little, act clearly. Boundaries aren't anger, they're care, drawn in straight lines. If you've been erased, make room for yourself kindly, firmly. Start a folder today. Future. You will thank present you. What part of my story felt familiar? Have you ever let facts, not fury, defend your worth? If this touched you, please subscribe for the next story. Drop a 1, or tell me where you're watching from. If it missed for you, say why and where you saw it. Share this with someone who needs steadiness tonight.